good talks coming. And perhaps to start with, I would like to share a little bit of housekeeping here. So I will share my slides. And do you see this now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is navigating data spaces, technology and governance side. So both technology and governance are needed in order to build data spaces. And we at Sitra have been studying these both topics and would like to share some of the results today with the guest speakers. And housekeeping, so please turn off your camera and mute your microphone when you are not speaking. It is allowed to raise questions, and I will be monitoring a little bit the chat during the presentations of our speakers. But in order, if you would like to me as a moderator to raise your question for the speakers, then I would ask you to put it like very clearly capital letters or something like question and then your question, but it's okay and welcome. You can also comment and chat with your peers there in the audience and let's have a lively discussion about the topics, but I just try to pick up the questions then and it makes my life easier if those are marked clearly, but then it's also okay to raise your hand there with the raise hand option, and I think it's up to the presenters if you would like to take questions during the presentation or after. I think it might be easier to take them after because it might not be so easy to see if somebody raises hand when you're in the presenter mode. But let's leave a little bit of flexibility in the schedule to answer a quick Q&A after each presentation. But then I will also have sort of fireside chat with both presenters after their presentations. So now it's time to sit back and enjoy. Lovely to have you here. So this is quite big crowd actually. So we are constantly getting surprised how well attended our meetings on the data space topics are. And the agenda of today is that myself, I will be presenting a little bit, setting the stage for this meeting today. And then we have two wonderful guest speakers, Oliver Dion from OneCub and New Governance, who has been helping us or working for us. So we did the other study on holistic data governance together with New Governance, and Oliver is one of the authors there. So he knows that topic as his own pockets. And then we have Matthias Buchhorn-Roth from Catena, from Cofinity X, that is operationalizing the automotive data space for Catena X. And Matthias has a long history on data spaces and data sharing altogether, and knows the technology sides really, really deeply. And it's super good to have this real example coming from the heart of German automotive industry. Even not sure if it's only German, but anyways, to see how these things are put into practice. And as I said, then we will have a bit of time to chat with both of the presenters. And originally, this was marketed to be 2 hours, but we are not going to stay here for 2 hours. So I think it will be 1 hour and a little bit more. So Matthias, I know that needs to leave in 1 hour. So that's our schedule for today. And maybe without further ado, I will move on setting the stage. I hear some voices from somebody's microphone might be on still, so maybe you can consider muting it. So my name is Antti Poikola. People call me Yogi. I'm here at Sitra. Sitra is hosting the GaiaX Hub in Finland, and that is our project. We are looking at data spaces more widely, not only looking through GaiaX lenses, but of course that's important. Sitra is also involved in the Data Spaces Support Center, where I also work with my colleagues in putting the general blueprint in place for common European data spaces. And you can find me from LinkedIn, and also these slides, what I present now, they are accessible through this bit.ly link, which I can share in the chat also afterwards. So to start with, this is an imaginary quartet of people who should be setting up a data space. So there is Beata, the Chief Executive Officer, responsible for making it business-wise viable and setting up, sketching the value propositions for participants and that kind of stuff. Of course, these 4 people are not working alone. They are working as a team, and probably they have other team members joining, but just to bring this a little bit to the ground level, that these things that we are talking today, they are somebody's jobs in data spaces. And well, we don't really help Beata today. It's not the topic of this discussion today. But then we have Leo, the Chief Legal Officer. And his question is, how on earth I can put a governance framework in place for our data space? And for Leo, there is some hints for in today's talks. And then Tessa. Tessa is really eager to hear what Matthias has to say about operationalizing the technical part of data space. So she's asking how to set up the technical infrastructures for our data space. She's the Chief Technical Officer. And then, of course, there is Oscar, who is taking care of all the operations of the data space beyond these other topics. So this is just to give you an image that there are people whose jobs are these things to put in place. And these jobs of Tessa and Leo, this image that I'm showing now, this comes from the Data Spaces Support Center. If you go to dssc.eu, there is some resources, including the glossary. And in the glossary, there is this image of different development stages of data space initiatives. And DSSC works so that we go around and look to the actual data space initiatives all around Europe and try to harmonize and make the common language for all of those. So typically, there is some sort of exploratory stage before. There is some key partners that would see that it would be great to have a data space in this domain or area, but they don't really have the critical mass yet. So they go evangelizing and getting more partners. And then once they have the critical mass of committed partners, they start preparing for the actual setting up the data space. They do plans and find funding and so forth, identify the pilot use cases and so forth. And then starts the implementation, actually building the data space. And then the operational stage is defined as the first, when the first data space use case becomes an operational. And from the glossary definition, it says that the development stage, so I think this should be, I copied wrongly. It should be the operational stage starts when the data space initiative has a tested implementation of infrastructures and governance framework, and the first use case becomes operational, so that the bit starts moving, data starts flowing between data providers and data recipients. So sorry, there was a typo, so I got confused. But anyways, the work of jobs of Tessa and Leo are here. So the data space initiative has a tested implementation of the needed infrastructures, the technical infrastructure that can actually run the data transactions and the governance framework. So these two jobs, they are really crucial. Without those, you can't have a functional data space. And don't get scared of the image. It's actually quite simple. This is the sort of image of the key components of a data space. So data space is defined as a distributed system, which is defined by a governance framework that enables secure and trustworthy data transactions between participants while supporting trust and data sovereignty. the data space is implemented by one or more infrastructures and enables one or more use cases. So now today we are really looking at the governance framework that defines a data space, and then data space infrastructures that implement the data space. And then once we have this governance framework and infrastructure in place, the data space is ready to support actual use cases, and all the value of the data space is created in the use cases. Otherwise, it doesn't have value. And the use cases are based on data transactions between data participants, and maybe there are some data products that are linked to the transactions. And actually, there should be then the data space governance authority who is responsible for the governance framework and some other roles in the data space. Well, that's what you can find from the Data Spaces Support Center material, DSSC conceptual model. And then I'm continuing a little bit of this talk of how to define things. What is the common language here? So the governance framework, what we are talking about, it's the principles, standards, policies, agreements, and practices that apply to the governance, management, and operations of a data space. And this governance framework is quite big and even perhaps vague thing. And the thing called data space rulebook, which is the tangible, actual, real documentation of the data space governance framework for operational use. And data space rulebook can be expressed in a human readable form or lawyer readable form if you wish, but also as machine readable format, which makes it then possible to implement it on the code level, the enforcement of the rules that have been set. And then the data space infrastructure is then the technical, legal, and procedural set of components and services that together enable the actual data transactions. And these are the things that we are talking today. And these are also things that Sitra has been sort of approaching from two working papers that we published recently. The other one is 25th of September and other one is 31st of October. So fairly recent two papers. The red one here is towards holistic EU data governance. So there we really look at not only from the data space perspective, but more widely what is related to data governance in the EU level and how that applies to data spaces. And then we did this technology landscape study where we basically took the question that, okay, if you are in the shoes of Tessa, the CTO of a data space, where should you start by looking what kind of technologies are available? I will give a very quick, brief overview of both of these. The studies are not super long. They are like 20, 30 pages, and there are some recommendations in the end. So maybe someone can share the links also in the chat. You can go and download and check them yourself. So there is a PDF version and also the website of both studies. So in this holistic EU data governance, we look it from the three levels. So you all know that there are a bunch of new EU data laws. There is the Data Governance Act, Data Act, and so forth. So these together create the regulatory framework for data sharing in Europe. And then from the regulation going down, there are the EU level bodies that actually implement some of these regulations on the EU level. And for example, the Data Innovation Board, that is European Data Innovation Board that is mentioned in the Data Governance Act and some other EU level bodies. But the big bulk of the work of implementing the regulation happens in the member states. And currently member states are really struggling to put in place all the new regulations that are coming from EU that are related to data, and there is a risk of some sort of also suboptimal results if these different pieces of laws are treated separately. And then in the bottom, but should be actually on the top, is where all the rubber hits the road, so to say, is the data space initiatives. There the data sharing happens, and the data space initiatives are typically dealing with some member state authorities, and they should follow the EU regulations, and then they have their own governance, business rules, and other reasons of setting some soft law components that so certain things are allowed and certain things are not allowed in their data space. And together these different levels, the rules for data sharing will be developed on all of these levels at the same time. And it brings a little bit complexity to the picture, but that's what we are trying to help with this study to give the overview. And I'm not going too deep on the recommendations, just giving some sort of highlights, and Olivier will talk a lot more of these. So there is policy recommendation of rule book. So we talk about the rule books, which is the data space governance framework documented, but then rule book should be something that connects these different rule books together, and you can get the different roles for different bodies in one place. And then other recommendation that I wish to highlight here is that we see that there should be sort of national level support hubs for the data space initiatives, because many of those initiatives, even if we speak about common European data spaces, they all start from somewhere, so some national or local environment. And currently Data Spaces Support Center, where CITRA is also participating, is great initiative on the EU level, but there is sort of missing the counterpart from the national level. And then this policy recommendation 8 is about how to make the different data space rule books more interoperable between each others. So we recommend that there should be sort of common preamble, some piece of text that should be same for every data space governance frameworks. And then the other study, Matthias is not going to speak about this study, but he's presenting the technology field in general. And I asked if he can have a look at the study, so there is no presentation of this technology landscape study as such, but maybe one of the key input from there is that the technology choices for data space initiatives, the tests can now look basically to 3 directions. She can look, probably many here in the audience are aware of these data space specific technology initiatives. There is the Data Spaces Support Center doing the blueprint, there is GaiaX, IDSA, Eclipse, etc. So these are initiatives that can be confusing for the beginner to understand how they relate to each other and so forth, but that's actually just one dimension to look at. So these are the data space technology initiatives. Then the other dimension is commercial offerings focused on data spaces. So there are companies that actually do productized versions of these same technologies, but something that is easier to take into use, and it's their business model to help data spaces to flourish. So they are quite a big, it's not big market yet, that's to be said, but there are many players who are entering to that market to help data spaces to actually do their job. And then, of course, there are many existing tools and solutions, enterprise architecture, bits and pieces that can very well support building a data space. So you don't need to create everything from scratch and reinvent the wheels. So basically one recommendation is that you should get started by testing the business ideas with the tools that you have instead of waiting for anything to get into any certain level of maturity. So that's the key picture from the other study, and there we recommend that these data space builders should support the actors with multiple roles in data spaces. So one can be data provider, but also data user at the same time. That's kind of no-brainer, but still it's very important kind of architectural principle. So that's why we brought it there. And then again, test the business cases against existing mature solutions instead of waiting for anything to get these emerging technologies to get into a robust level of maturity. You can already start what you have. Really need to develop the business cases first. And then we recommend to monitor the market, these data space specific initiatives and follow them closely and give feedback and be early adopter and testing those, but not to stay waiting for anything. And then fourth one is to pay attention to the user experience. Also sort of no-brainer, but super, super important that the data spaces can't fly if they're too complicated. So that's my introduction on the topic of today. And then I would be inviting first Oliver on the stage. So welcome. Can you show your face? Yes. And put your presenter? Thanks. So Oliver Dion, I've known you for quite some time already. He's super active in the data sharing field, starting from the open data back in the days and going to the personal data, my data, and now in the data spaces. And one of the definitely innovators in the field. And it was a big pleasure to work with Oliver in this study towards the holistic EU data governance. So please.
Thanks a lot, Yogi. I'm trying to put in full. Do you have it in full screen mode?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thanks a lot, Yogi. Actually, it's been a few years now. We've been working together within my data and Citra, especially on this governance topic. Just to present myself, I'm working. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm working at the moment on two very different data spaces. One is called EONA X, so some of you may know it, mobility and tourism data space in France, especially in the context of the Paris 2024 Olympics. So we are at let's say the pilot and funding phase now. And I'm also working at the same time with ESA on the space data space study. So it's less advanced, and it allows me to see from the inside two very different animals with different, very different governance problematics. And so we led with Citra this study about the holistic EU data governance for almost a year now. And there was an important interview phase of the ecosystem, different data spaces, but also policymakers at EU level and at member state level in different member states. We talked to the support organizations like Gaia-X, Fireware, IDSA, and so on, and also to the sectors, to different sectors. So we wanted to have a full picture of the ecosystem, and so sorry, I show you again the pyramid. I will. It was a great explanation of the pyramid from Yogi. I would just add on this pyramid that we wanted to, through this pyramid, we wanted to simplify the view to understand the dynamics in the ecosystem, in the governance of the data spaces. And indeed, we summarized it with 3 levels. And as you see, there is a top-down dynamic. Basically, it's EU regulations translated into member state regulations, but it can also be EU level standards. So there is a top-down dynamic, and there is also a bottom-up dynamic coming from the data spaces. And the middle layer is generally the member states. The things that we wanted to highlight in the report is that we've got to find a balance between both, between top down and bottom up, and so between regulation, top down, and innovation, which is more bottom up. We need top down. We need top down to align stakeholders to bring trust within the ecosystem. But if there is too much top down, we won't be fast enough and we won't adapt to the problematics of the specific sectors on the local projects. And we also need bottom up. We need to let the local ecosystems, the data space initiatives adapt. But if we just do bottom up, if we just do innovation, there is a risk, a huge risk that they drift apart and that we recreate silos. So it's always a matter of balance between this top down, bottom up, and this regulation and innovation. And this is hard to find, and so we in the reports we try to dig deeper in the structure of a data space and how it relates to all other levels of the pyramid. As Yogi told you in the introduction, when we talk about governance, we use the two related concepts of data governance framework and rule books. So a rule book will be a document, either machine readable or human readable, containing all the general terms and conditions for ruling a data ecosystem. And Citra has worked on it. If I'm correct, Yogi, you can correct me in the comments. Citra has started to work in 2020 on rulebooks, so we've got some experience now with rulebooks, and which are applied in many different data spaces, different sectors all over Europe. It's a framework to build the constitution of your data space, and it will contain rules for sharing data, but rules about many different topics, and it will also contain the decision-making processes of your data space. So it is a key document, and we will push it further in the recommendations, but we advise for all data spaces to use harmonized way of creating and expressing rule books. It is a great starting point for a data space. But if you look more closely at the rules contained inside the rulebook, the question we asked for the study was where do those rules, those many rules that can contain a rule book, come from? And the difficulty lies in the fact that there are very different rules. Some are what we could call hard law and some what we could call soft law. Some come from the EU level, some from the member state level. You've got the technological standards, the sectoral standards, but you also have internal business rules decided among the players of a local data space. So it's very hard for data space operators, data space initiators to create their rule book and to adapt it to their own context. First, they need to identify all the key rules they've got to embed automatically that are mandatory. It's regulation. You need to put the rules directly in your rule book. Then about standards and code of conducts, you've got to choose the best suited rules. For instance, within your sector, I told you I work here with ANIX on mobility and tourism. We've got to identify the key tourism and mobility semantic standards, and we've got to implement them in the rulebook. And finally, you've got internal rules that you can decide locally between the members of the data space. Of course, on top of this, you will be able one-to-one between two members to create contracts, specific contracts for sharing data. But the idea is to simplify the management of your data space and the governance of your data space to agree on a common set of rules within the data space. Having a standardized way to express those rules and a machine readable way to express those rules will allow data space operators to implement compliance as code mechanisms, processes, and to automatize the compliance work within the data space. But also when a data space will want to talk and to exchange data and to share data with another data space, if we've got a standard, machine readable standard for rulebooks, we will be able to check for compatibility between the governance model and the rules of the two data spaces, which is the first step before actually sharing data. But as we've seen, though, you want to create the data space, the rule book of your data space. It's hard. You've got rules coming from many different places of the pyramid. And so we with Citra, we thought about this, and we pushed a new concept called the role book, which would be the role book would be an open, transparent, and dynamic registry of roles and bodies involved in data sharing. Some of those roles will be for decision making, for creating, for instance, regulations. You get the EU Parliament, and some will apply rules like a data space or inside a data space. But the idea is to all share the same mapping and to connect it to an open rulebook library where you will have all the rules pushed by all the entities within the rulebook. And which means that when you're a data space operator, you want to create, for instance, the example here is a mobility data space initiative in Finland. You will start by having a look at what's already existing within the open rulebook library. Okay, I need hard law about data. I take the rules in the library. Now I'm working in mobility, so I need mobility standards. I take it in the library, and I'm in Finland. Maybe there are specific regulations I need to implement in my data space, so I take the rules in the library. And in the end, the work you will have to do on the rule book will be limited to only to local rules, internal rules between the members of your data space. So this would streamline the creation of rule books. And the combination, we believe that the combination of the rulebook and rulebook approach, sorry, the pronunciation is almost the same if you're French like me and you don't speak very well English, but the combination of both, we believe, would streamline the governance processes of the data space at a local level, but will also connect them to all the other decision-making levels of the pyramid, which would create this. So it might look a bit complex, but it's just a combination, it's just a network of roles and rule books. And you see on the right side of the screen, if you are in your Finnish mobility data space, you gather rules coming from the required parts of the ecosystem. And this would, we believe, avoid gaps, duplications, and overlaps within the three levels of the ecosystem. We would better identify all together. We would crowdsource the creation of rules and identify all together what is missing in the ecosystem and what is too much in the ecosystem. And we could also, it would help us to create where it's needed and only where it's needed, coordination bodies or coordination roles within the ecosystem. And here, so yes, we sum up the key results of the study and the interviews within the ecosystem. So as we said, at the European level, the pain points, the main pain point is to find the right balance between regulation and innovation. It will have to be a discussion, and we believe that EDIB, the creation of the European Data Innovation Board, will help a lot in this regard. And also we see the difficulty of understanding all the roles and the responsibilities of all the bodies involved at EU level. At member state level, the thing is, it's more than a pain point. Is we identified that is it's really the missing link of the ecosystem, and it's very important and not well addressed enough today. The thing is, we all want data space initiative to be EU level as soon as possible, but on the field, when we interview people, we understand that most of the time, when you create a data space in a specific sector, for instance, you need to gather a community of practice. And most of the time, it's people that know each other, that share the same language, that know their market. So it happens at the member state level. And we need to address this as soon as possible. And it's very important also because they are the initiatives, they are looking for funding at the member state level a lot. So we want to help them there. And finally, at the data space level, we saw that there were pain points to create their governance structure. It's hard for data spaces to know what to do when they create their governance structure. And also key pain points about personal data and competition law. Most data spaces are unaware of the possibilities regarding those two topics, and they fear the regulation issues that might arise. And finally, the key recommendations. So at the European level, we get two big recommendations. The first one is to create this EU overarching rulebook for the data spaces. And also to create a regulator super club. We see that, to formalize the alliance of regulators, since regulation covers so many topics within a data space. At member state level, is to create member state hubs for data spaces, and coordinators at the member state level. We believe that there should be one coordinator for each member states. And finally, at data space level, we believe that we should standardize for all data spaces these rule books. We should also have a common data sharing rule language. It's already in progress, for instance, in IDSA, GaiaX, and so on. But we believe that we should talk more together within the community of practice and agree on a common data sharing rule language. And finally, we believe that all the rule books of all the data spaces in Europe should start with the same rules, with the same lines. And for instance, those lines could be proposed by the EDIB. Yogi?
Yes, thanks, Olivier. So right now I don't see questions on the chat. Okay, I see actually one. Are there already some plans for the EU level regulator super club?
We'll see what happens within EDIB. I can tell you I can give you an example of what's happening at the French level. At the French level, the regulator for data spaces is called ARCEP, and it's a telco, the telecom regulator. They will work with the privacy regulator, which is the CNIL, but they are the leaders, and you get one regulator that will represent all regulators regarding data space issues and what regulators need to do with data spaces, especially regarding data intermediaries. I don't know how it could happen at EU level. I suppose this will be one big discussion within the EDIB.
Yeah, I would answer the same way that so far, in my understanding, there is no clear path to that yet. But I think the need for better coordination between the EU regulators it's becoming quite evident. So the problem is known. The solutions are yet to be seen.
As we already had this discussion together, Yogi, you cannot force, for instance, member states to implement this or this organization. They decide on by themselves. So it kind of depends on the member states, and at EU level, there should be a big discussion about this.
Yes. So I think time-wise we need to move on and invite Matthias on the stage since he also needs to leave. So I've known also Matthias now not as quite a long time than Oliver. I think Matthias was present in the meeting roughly a year ago when we launched the process at Citra to make this data spaces technology landscape, and we got a good overview of many technologies. And you are still at Microsoft, and now you are on Cofinity X, and really putting these all things in practice. And what I learned from Matthias a lot, seem to know almost everybody in Europe who is dealing with these technologies, and we had very good coffee chats over Teams of sharing information and who is doing what and where are the different development streams going, and you are navigating on these streams and trying to make something that practically works today and not only tomorrow. So with that introduction, welcome, Matthias.
Thank you, Antti, for the introduction. I will share my screen and I also post the link to the presentation. You can find in the chat. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I want to talk about our journey in Catena X as well at Cofinity X, that we are the first operational company for the global automotive network. I'm a product lead for enablement services and core services. And I'm happy to speak here today. And I want to have 4 key topics I want to talk today. As one is a operational model, another one is a Gaia X governance and governance in general, the onboarding, how we onboard our partners to this data space, and I want to talk a little bit about use cases. I have just 20 minutes time, so go through that, and after that, I'm open to discuss with you about your questions. I hope there are some questions. Yeah, we are live. So since the 16th of October, we have this operational environment up and running. So we have like a work split. We are taking care for the operational environment. Catena X is working on internationalization. And we also are open source. I will tell you later. We started the Eclipse Structures X community, and it's also a big learning for us. We were a consortia with more than 2,000 people working in this project the last 2.5 years, and now we move from these consortia, very close consortia, to an open source community. And we have some challenges, but we have also a clear timeline when we have this shift ready. At first, I want to tell you a little bit about the operational model of Catena-X. We'll share some things, but if you want to learn more about it, you find here under this link, you find this link also in the presentation I shared in the chat. So there, it looks a little bit chaotic in the first time, but I want to try to explain. So we are the operational company taking care for the core services and as well, very soon the enablement services. I will come very soon. What does it mean? And we work very close together with the Catena-X association. That means this is like authority that brings streamline everything, because we are not the only operational environment in the future. We are the first one. So Catena-X association will take care for the architecture, for the regulatory framework, for picking up the standards. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. So I will come later which one we are using. And we also have the certification process because we are automotive. We are strongly regulated, and we have regulations like ISO 27001 and TISAX. We have data processing agreements. So everything is certified here by the auditor. And on the left side, you see the open source community, the Eclipse Structures X community project. It started with 27 members working in this open source community, and now we are opening it up, and we also send our developers back to the development to the Eclipse Structures X project to develop that further. And as you can see here, we have like building blocks. We have our keep it simple or keep it together kits. So we developed this Catena-X operational system. You see, that's part of the enablement services and core services. It's like the enablement service is a fully decentralized. Everyone have to install that on their side. It's like if you compare that with the internet, it's like the internet router and the internet browser, and the core service is like the web server. So it's federated, so it can be federated by different operating companies. As I mentioned, is like when we take a look into that, so we use International Database Association, IDSA, Eclipse Database Components. So there was some glitches here. Gaia X, and many of these things we are using as well, these existing tools. CRM, called with us Business Partner Data Management. So that's a huge effort we have in a global supply chain. It's like this, keep this customer and more partner data ready. So we speak about golden record. So every supplier, OEM, have their own suppliers, and they don't know what is the right record. And this is a real challenge in this global network. And we try to address that in Catena-X as well in one use case. Data storage. We are connecting these things with the EDC. We're connecting data lakes. We're connecting enterprise resource planning tools like SAP. We connecting cloud storages. And on the other hand, the metadata is in digital twin registries. And the semantic models called asset administration shell for the industry. So that's like digital twin descriptions that describe also relationship between the digital twins. On the customer identity and access management, we have identity providers, and we are moving now from centralized identity providers to decentralized identity and self-sovereign identity. It's a very important step. And everything, I would say 100% what we're talking here is API management and how we need to protect the APIs from data breaches. This is very important. To fulfill a little bit on the right side is like we have Sovety is one partner in our ecosystem, but we have much more. I want to only point to some more industrial data space providers like T-Systems with a data intelligence hub. It's SAP, it is Siemens, it's Bosch or ZF-DOS. So you see big players here in the supply chain market playing here a role in this data space. What we are seeing now is a transition from a centralized to a decentralized. So some components are still centralized, but we are trying to solve that and bring it to a federated. And many things like enablement services, they're fully decentralized, and it's on the side of the customer, and the customer can decide if they are software as a service providers, or I install that in my data center. And this is part of the IDSA rulebook we wrote last year. As you can see here, this is a service map. I don't want to go too deep into it, but as you can see, this is a core service section A. So, and we move these core service section B services more to core service section A. So it's federated. And then we have these enablement services like the data space protocol, contract management, these are identity and access checks, policy management with W3C ODRL. The digital twin context is the metadata and how you store the metadata in a secure way. So we store it in a registry. We have calculate, for example, the product carbon footprint inside the item relationship service. So the supply chain can calculate that and protect the data from the others. So it's like a recursive calculation through the supply chain. And the asset administration submodel server is holding this information. And everything looks very complicated. So we decided to have a simple data exchanger. So it's a very simplified interface for small, medium customers. They only can upload their Excel files we prepared for them for specific use cases. So they have a much easier work, and they can integrate that very easy. Yeah. And as you can see, we have this business applications, this commercial applications on our marketplace. We have open source applications we are hosting for our customers. I think the same model is like HashiCorp or Postgres or MySQL, and we have the same approach that we use open source, contributing back to open source, and operate this open source for our customers and partners. As you can see, in this governance framework, Antti talked about before, he said roles and responsibilities are very crucial. And we also see that in the last 2.5 years, we have to define that in an operational model, like core service providers or onboarding service providers. What is the rule in it? What do the advisory provider, that's like these consulting companies of the world, they need to help the companies to ramp on, because now the OEMs coming and say you have to be Catena X compliant, and now these customers come to us and say, hey, can you help us, Cofinity X? And we said, no, we are a core service provider, you please reach out to the advisory provider and onboarding service provider. They are certified and they helping you on this journey. So they are certified as well. They are working already in Catena X, so they are well educated to help our customers. And another thing is the enablement service providers. So they install the connectors, the digital twins, the decentralized identity, for example. And then we have the data provider and the data consumer. And then we have the conformity assessment body. So they prove everything and they give a certification to all the roles to make that happen. Okay, something to the data space governance. We are Gaia X compliant through the trust framework. So what we are doing, we have this self-description factory in our system that holds the Gaia X credentials. We have used managed identity wallet. So that's the SSI wallet. And we are using from T-Systems the Gaia X Digital Clearinghouse. So as you can see, this is well integrated Catena X with Gaia X. Here, I want to say something about onboarding. It's very important to see what Antti mentioned already, the data meshes. The data mesh is here down below. A data mesh is an internal organization, how you organize in a decentralized way your data. Huge companies started with data meshes and data strategies. So a data mesh is consists data domains. In this data domains, you have different data products, and you have to think about with the data space which data products you want to share with your community. So in this case, as you see here, we developing data planes in the Eclipse data space connector that connects the data apps in a secure way. Everything is protected with the identity wallet, and the metadata is in a digital twin registry. Everything is installed in a demilitarized zone. So we are using Eclipse data space components, and it's like a specialized EDC called Eclipse Tractors X EDC with some enablements, additional enablement services on top of that. So this enables our customers to communicate to the Catena X network. So as you can see, that's from both sides. One side is to enable the data sharing with others, but you have to enable, or the customers have to enable for their own data products and data strategy. This is very important as well. Use cases. I want to come to some use cases. As you know, we have some crises for resiliency, global supply chain resiliency. We had these regulations. They also, Citra described the role of regulations. This is the innovation, a driver for innovation. So, for example, the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act by the German government taken place in March 2023. The Supply Chain Due Diligence Directive from the European Commission was approved now from the Parliament. Now we go ahead, and also every company in the supply chain is affected by these laws and regulations. And we want to have this innovation together. We call it co-innovation through open source, and we are aware that that's very costly. So what we are doing now, Oliver Ganser said, we move now from a ecosystem, what we had in automotive, to an ecosystem. So you see, things you never happened before, that companies like BMW, Volkswagen, Bosch, and all these competitors working together to be more efficient on the innovation side, set standards. So this is really nice to see that they work now together and helping each other. As you can see, this is the Tractus X development kits, and that address the use cases. What we are doing, we identify the use case and write adapters as a REST API definition. So all the companies like Siemens, SAP, as an example, they have their sustainability solutions in place, but they are not interoperable with each other. So in this case, we define these kits to make that interoperable with each other. One example is the EcoPass. The EcoPass is like a digital product pass or the battery pass. So these digital product pass and battery passes, they are now interoperable with each other. So OEMs will come and say to their suppliers, they have to be interoperable with these standards. And behind that, the semantic model called asset administration shell submodels. That's from a definition of the IDTA, and the IDTA is also part, or they announced this as a standard, ISO IEC standard. So the industry take this and make them to a standard. What we are doing at Cofinity X, we cannot do everything in once. We pick the use cases and we're starting with the golden record service with a business partner data managing as a first use case. As a second use case, we have an open source solution with TraceX, and then we come with value added services on top of the golden record services. Yeah. And this is our marketplace. So this is a fair marketplace. So it is open to everyone, and the solutions have to be certified by Catena X Association. And as you can see, that's open source as well, commercialized solutions. So everyone have the choice to take their solutions in the supply chain. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. If you have questions, I'm lucky to answer your questions.
Thanks a lot. There are a couple of questions coming from the chat, and the audience feel free to ask more. So one is that your slide number 4, where you show the structure of Cofinity X in relation to Catena X. So the question here is that why do I not recognize the building blocks from the data spaces support center blueprint in this picture? The question is not coming from me, but I just read it out loud. So do you know the DSSC building blocks, and could you elaborate a little bit how is your view of those and the relationship to DSSC?
It's very interesting. So Catena X is now 3.5 years in place. So much older than DSSC, I guess. So, and I would say this community is huge. It's 2,000 people working on that. And not everyone is aware of everything. I can tell you, I have also difficulties to follow up all these different initiatives, IDSA, Gaia X, DSSC, Catena X with 2,000 people. It's even hard to follow up in one, but to follow up in everything it's impossible. You need more than one lifetime, I guess. So the question here is how we handle this complexity and how we simplify these data spaces and make it more attractive and easier for the people to understand. By now, even the experts don't have the big picture. Yeah. And this is something I hope in the future, with the help of DSSC, we can simplify that and streamline that a little bit. But you see, it's like plants growing in a different speed somewhere, and now we have to think about to make like a one cut and make streamline it a little bit. Yeah.
Good. That's what I expected to hear from you. So this is really older history in Catena-X, and DSSC is just coming up and trying to actually build a little bit of the common language, but the common language comes into place, which is not empty. So it takes a bit of time. Then there is another question, actually one from me, and I combine it with other ones. So I was curious about Cofinity X. So how closely tied you are to Catena-X, or do you foresee that you would probably serve similar kind of infrastructure for other data spaces? And then there is a question from Antti Kivelä that what is your business model?
Many questions. I try to address every question. You mentioned a fair data space in your governance framework document, and this is also what we try to reach with this complex model. We don't want to have one company that overrules everyone. There's a reason why we have this open source framework. We have this association, well known, everything. So these people in the Catena-X association, they work since 2.5, 3 years in the consortia, coming now to the association, and we are one of many operational companies. And by design, we are not allowed to influence Catena-X association, but they come with standards. We will try to fulfill that. But in another hand, we also want to build a community. So it's like without a community, without any interaction, this is not working. But in another hand, we need to share the power because we are a democracy. We are not a dictatorship. So in this case, we speak about co-competition. We want to collaborate, but we also want to have the competition and a fair market. And another question about the business model.
Yeah,
I would say it's not done yet to 100%. So we need to find ways. We have a rough understanding what we are doing for core services. We said we don't want to charge any data sharing. So if you want to share data, we don't want to charge you. If you want to consume data, this is our business model, that here we want to get the money from the people. They get money out of that. Yeah. So, but we know we want to grow the network as much as we can. Yeah. So we come with very good prices that, and we think we will find some ways in the end when we are in the use cases, on a use case level, to help the customers. Then we bring the value. Yeah. And this is something we are not done yet. We will find out how we refinance our developers here, yeah, and our operational cost. Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at the time, so if I understood correctly, you are a little bit under pressure. Do you still have a couple of minutes, or do you
Yes, I
need
have
to
a
leave
couple
now?
of minutes. Mhm.
Yeah, okay, then I would like to invite Oliver back on stage so that I can have a quick chat with both of you to conclude the session of today. So to start with, I would ask you to think, I give you a moment to think, one question for each other. So you saw Oliver's presentation from the governance and the role book. Is Oliver here? Yes. And then the other way around. So Oliver could pose a question to Matthias. But as I didn't prepare for you to this, I know that you might have a little bit, need a little bit of thinking time. So I will also give one question for both of you. And I start with Oliver. So basically, going back to the idea of role book, and this is something that we are, it seems to attract people. Like I saw from the chat that it tackles the problem that it's so complex, the field, and everything is messy. But how this also feels also kind of gigantic challenge. So how do you see it being done in reality? So is there some sort of examples, or it's just so that it feels a little bit daunting task? So can you convince us that it's doable?
In my mind, we would need different things. We would need a coordinating body for this work. And I don't know if it could be, maybe it could be a new coordinating body, but at least it would be done in coordination with the Data Space Support Center. And this is my personal opinion. We discussed this already together, Yuri, but at least in coordination. And maybe Matthias, I understand when you answer the question, why is the vocabulary different? Just because Catena was there way before the Data Space Support Center. But to me, I understand the role of the Data Space Support Center exactly like this, to help about the coordination, not to replace IDSA, Gaia, and so on, but to help with common glossary, common vocabularies in general. And for this, so I would see the help of this coordinator, and also the help of mature, the most mature data spaces like Catena. So my question to Matthias would be, is your rulebook open?
So I read the rule books, and I also was involved in the IDSA rulebook.
Yes.
So there was like a blueprint for the IDSA rulebook.
Which was inspired from the Citra rulebook, Yogi, am I right?
IDSA, the International Data Space Association rulebook, was inspired by the Citra rulebook. I would say this is one thing. This rule books give a rough overview, and I would say the same vocabulary. But on the technical side, it's very important if we want to have interoperability, we need like technical committees as well, and we have to bring it to a real standard. Today, this is for the developers. There is like some architecture high-level discussions. You cannot build interoperable systems with it. Never, ever. If you see W3C, how they standardize, they're very concrete. They have how HTTP or HTTPS was defined, or TCP. It's very concrete. And this is like a USB stick as well. So like it's very well written and it's very concrete. Have no, I would say, it's open to speculate. So you have to be very concrete, like a technical guy. We cannot speculate on these things. We have to define that and make a specification. And we are good in that. Why we should do that for data spaces, what we are doing in the industry with ISO and IEC, with IEEE, for example. And This is something I post this here in the chat. I believe that the Eclipse Data Space Working Group can do these technical things in the future. And Citra and DSSC will focusing on this rule books and these things. And the Data Space Working Group is doing the technical stuff as well. Yeah. What do you think?
Fully agree. It should be different players.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot hear you, Yogi.
Sorry. So there are a couple of questions from the chat. I will, or you can also see them yourself. But I just wanted to pose one question for Matthias, and then also Matthias can ask something from Oliver. So my question for Matthias is, this might be a little bit hard one, or maybe it's easy, I don't know. But if you go back to my slides, and there was this Chief Technical Officer, Tessa, from a data space initiative. Let's imagine a situation where there is a good consortium of key anchor partners who want to make a data space happen, and they have funding in place, and they have plans in place, and then they have hired the technical team there. What would be your recommendation, tip, or hint for Tessa as something that she should really take into her first days of job into account?
So I need to explain the hiring strategy for
Okay.
building this data space, right?
No. Let's imagine that there is a person recently hired to put operationalize data space technically, and just about to start working, not have done yet much. So what would be your kind of kind advice for this new person taking the challenge?
Okay. I had this challenge in June when I start as a employee number 3 from in Catena X. I'm sitting in the shoes now. I'm experienced as a cloud architect before and data space architect for Microsoft, and even that is very, very challenging. I would say you cannot do everything in once. You have to start somewhere. Something it's applicable. It's easy. Start with a framework. Don't reinvent the wheel. The question now is, what is the right framework for you? And that cannot answer anyone in once. So I would say go to community meetings like Gaia X or Catena X or and others, and speak with the people. If you read documents after documents, there's a lot of things written. It doesn't help you. You have to speak with people. Give or take some informations and unspoken things or unwritten things. Ask them what is and ask them for guidance. And this is I can recommend you. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a question for Oliver? Anything in mind?
Does Matthias have a question for me?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Okay. You are part of these two initiatives DSSC. So I want to bring it also back to you. Is like, do you aware of Catena X? Read some documents of Catena X before, or is it something you said this is it was not, I would say, public enough? You don't reach out to the people?
Yeah. Not recently, but I understand that there is new material now. So I will check it. And the thing is, especially regarding governance aspects, you don't have that many mature data spaces today. I've heard recently that there is a bit less than 200 data space initiatives all around Europe, and you might be among the most mature ones. So I would be eager to understand what kind of reflections you had inside Catena. Yeah, of course.
Oliver, was a question to me?
No, it's not a question. I would be willing to know more. I checked a long time ago, and there was not that much material available. And if you follow, I don't know if you want to follow this road, but if we push further the concept of rulebook, it would be attached to an open rulebook library, which would mean each data space would, if they want to, publish parts of the entire or an entire rulebook.
So this is published already. So you find all the links inside my presentation. And it is like the consortia was closed before, and now with the go live, they publish more and more information about it. I'm very aware of that. Yeah.
It's
Good. I think I would like to ask a couple of questions from the chat. So there is one from Matthias. What was the key economic driver for the competing companies like BMW and Mercedes to come together and work together in Catenax?
There are two things. The first thing is a supply chain crisis. Or more than one crisis. There are so many. So the problem is if, for example, material is stuck somewhere, and you need to find a new supplier. Today, it takes up to 2 years to find a new supplier, onboard the supplier, and we need to reduce the time to onboard the supplier and find an alternative supplier. Another thing is that also the complexity also from the technology and the interfaces are so complex. If you want to change, for example, a light, and you build the light in a BMW, and later you want to build the same light into Renault, for example, then it takes also additional 1 year minimum to adjust these technical specifications. So that we say, okay, we need to streamline here, working together, reduce the complexity. If we don't use the complexity, we waste so much money. We have so many dependencies in the supply chain we cannot handle anymore. And another factor are regulations. Like, as you said, do you know we have to share information across the supply chain, like product carbon footprint, human rights, and so on. So, but these supply chains, they are intransparent as designed. And now we have to change that. It's like, okay, how we share information to an intransparent supply chain. And this is something we work on that, we learn about it, and we try to find solutions to make it more transparent. Yeah.
Good. There is actually a question that somehow touches both the regulation and the supply chain. So how are the SMEs within the Catenax data space keeping up with the regulation changes relevant to their operations in the supply chain, assuming they do not have resources to follow up and understand all the EU regulatory changes relevant to the industry?
That's right. 70% are SME customers, small, medium customers. They have no 10 developers in the back to develop or to connect their backend systems to the front-end system. So what we need to reach, we need to bring these connectors, decentralized identities, to a more commodity level. So everyone can, for example, buy a appliance like a router, put it there, or use software as a service providers. They provide that as a service, so they don't need to take care for it. And also SAP very soon will provide their services, their data services in the data space. So if you are a SAP customer, for example, you have a EDC, a connector, you have a decentralized identity with a wallet and so on. So this is coming in the next years, and this is commodity. The customers don't need to take care, and you will see in 3 to 5 years, if no one takes care and no one speaks about data spaces anymore, then we reach this goal, what we want to reach. Yeah.
Good. There is one more question for Oliver, and then one for both of you, and then we are closing the shop for today. So this is a simple one for Oliver. So what are the data spaces you are involved with? Was it that Iona X was mentioned, but people didn't catch? Where are you active?
It's Iona X. Iona X.
X.
I put the link. And the other one is not yet alive. We are just at the feasibility study level. It would be the space data space. So with space players, European Space Agency, and so on.
Yeah, and then one for both of you. So basically, from your opinion, what you see here, the field, what are the most advanced data spaces that might be worth studying a little bit if somebody is coming behind? If you should mention 3 most advanced data spaces in Europe, what would be those? Anyone can take the first hit. Let's see if you take if you find out the same or different answers. That's curious.
I wouldn't say data space. I want to come to industries. I think the first industry they are very much ahead is automotive, because they have money and they have the need in the supply chain. The second industry is manufacturing, with the same challenges that automotive has. And then what I can see from my time when I work at Microsoft as data space architect, that's energy, like Omega X. And because we are an energy grid, European energy grid. We need to exchange this information. We need to improve how the energy will distributed and used. And another hand, that's travel. You see travel over everywhere. How you have a better user experience when you're traveling from one country to another one. And this is Iona X. This is Tyrol. That's Austria. This is in Spain. There are travel and mobility is another one. And as well skilling, digital skilling as well. And here is for example, Prometheus X. Yeah.
Yes, I would just add exactly the same list as you. I would add the Agdata Hub for agriculture.
Agriculture, yes.
Agdata Hub.
Okay.
But I have the same list as you.
Yeah.
That's good.
Thank you, Oliver.
So I think this is a good moment to say thank you for both of you, and thank you for the audience. This was really a nice chat, and as discussed in the chat, we will post the recording as well as the presentations, if you give the permission for that, on the event website, and send it over email to everybody. And from our end, from Citra, there is one final thing that I would like to kind of put here as an advertisement. So we are preparing a big data festival in the April in Helsinki next year. So this will be sort of ending event for the current project what we are running at Citra, but it's also beginning of something new. So we will launch this Finnish Data Alliance going forward with these things. And we are still figuring out the exact date, but it will be somewhere in early April, the most probably. So this is kind of teaser. So welcome to nice spring Helsinki if you wish. But with that being said, I think it's time to say goodbye and enjoy your days and enjoy making data spaces live. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.